You are watching Psychic Witch Talk, hosted by Christine Rossi and Diana Rachel, shot at the Mystic Dream in Walnut Creek, California.
Hi, and welcome to the Mystic View, or the Psychic View, really. And this is Christina Rossi.
Thank you.
And I'm Diana Rachel. We are both members of the Psychic Guild at the Mystic Dream.
Yes.
So you can actually book a reading with either one of us. I'm here every Friday, and you're here on
Mondays and Wednesdays.
Yes, so you can just go to themysticdream.com and book a reading with either one of us.
And we're on the list now. We're on the list.
Yes!
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, this
is an exciting thing.
Yeah, so we're going to stop and have a little party hat celebration. And going from there, today's topic, we are talking about spooky things. And Christina and I both do house clearings.
Yes.
I like to call them metaphysical evictions, but this is also my philosophy is a little less nice than some people. It's about...
I'm just clearing. She's evicting people.
Yeah, my opinion is if you can't pay rent or wash the dishes, get out.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, this is just my basic is even if you are not corporeal, you either have a job to do or you do not live with me. That's my
Well, that
feelings
takes care of that. I was planning on moving in next Wednesday, but never mind.
Can you load a dishwasher?
Oh, yes.
You're in.
Oh, thank you.
So that's really all we're looking for.
So spooky. So,
Yes.
I mean, a lot of people are very frightened when they see spirits or have, poltergeist activity in their home. It can be very scary for people.
It can be. Sometimes it can be prankish or fun or funny. And a lot of the times I get called in, I used to joke when I was working in Minneapolis that I would serve mostly atheists who were dealing with aggressive hauntings. And my tagline was, I believe, so you don't have to.
Very nice. I like that.
And so one of the things that I was dealing with was there's one house that I worked on in St. Paul and something that a lot of people aren't aware of in the history of Minneapolis is that Minneapolis was dry during Prohibition. St. Paul was nominally dry because the mayor could deal with the mob that he could run that the mob could run guns and liquor through most of St. Paul on the condition that they did all of their actual crime and murder elsewhere. And so there was this space that they built called the Wabasha Caves that's still open today. And it's man-made caves that occasionally homeless people sneak into them, but there's actually a club and a museum down there. And they could go and conduct all the business they needed to in those caves in St. Paul. But there was still the problem of getting the liquor to the caves, especially since they were also distributed out to the rest of the country. And so there were several houses in North St. Paul where they had all these secret passages and doorways and spaces where they haven't found all of the rum tunnels yet. They keep still finding them.
Oh, my goodness.
And so my friend had just bought a late 1928 craft style house. It looks teeny tiny on the outside and it's gigantic on the inside. It was very TARDIS for Doctor Who fans. But it also had all of these carved back rooms, and the closets would have rooms behind them. And I got the sense when I went in there was a lot of bad stuff that went down in that house. And there was one spot in particular where even in winter, and winters in Minnesota get vicious. No, it's not snow 365, maybe 360. No, it's way less than that. But when you go in there was a spot where no matter what they did, snow would melt when it hit it, and nobody knew what the heck was down there.
Not good.
Kind of disturbing because he actually got the property manifest and couldn't find any explanation for it. And to this day, they still keep finding new tunnels that are leading all to the Wabasha Caves. So we're pretty sure this is one of the tunnel houses. And unfortunately, it was the mob. So there's a whole bunch of murder going on and other things that were equally unsavory, especially since I got the sense that this particular house had also been used for a bit of 1930s style human trafficking and brothel work.
Oh.
And so I was actually teaching the lady of the house how to do some of these clearings and cleansings because her partner had a lot of very complex things going on with his interaction with the spirit world anyway. And it was in a neighborhood where there was a lot of conflict. And so at one point, I had her take a rattle So I was actually doing the thing where I was walking through and basically taking every spirit I could find and basically making it go count things that take a few millennia to count, just to get them out of the house. And there's one spot in the wall where, even though the house was thoroughly heated, it was completely cold, and I could actually feel something moving behind that wall.
Oh,
and
that's
when
scary.
she was following me, she was shaking a rattle, and I mean, it's a rattle, and like the rattle she was moving it, it just stopped silent for no reason. And so I did some extra work on that spot, and the rattle started again. But it was just one of those, something was here and it didn't like what we were doing, and it was a mine or yours situation. And so at that point, that one was one where there were two bars in Minneapolis. One was owned by Druids, and one was routinely blessed by someone who was really good at making sure there weren't passengers in bars. And passengers are basically spirits that hang out and wait to jump into attics because it's just a super easy ride. And so, like, I went to one of my favorite bars there that happened to have someone who did this work to make sure they didn't have that problem with their patrons, because they considered sane, stable patrons better for business than, people that melted down in the street. And so, I went there and I cooled out, and it was just the sense that I'd taken on something so much bigger than I was.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah, and I realized that just being able to walk out was a win. But I kept for a good year after, I kept sending them instructions and having them do little things. And here's the thing that ultimately is settled down to, and this is something I usually say when I do a house clearing, is yes, there's spirits in activity, but most of the time it has to do with what's going on with the people that live in the house right now. And so a few years later, because I've been friends with this couple for years, they did tell me there were some other things, some secrets between them that came out. And that settled most of the activity that I hadn't been able to clear out.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, and I have another story, but I think, especially since I've talked a lot for me, more than I normally do, actually. So,
well, I'm trying to decide which one I want to share. I do remember we're talking about spooky and scary. So that ominous feeling of like, uh-oh, something's following me. I didn't expect it.
Yep.
I had was guided to go, oh my goodness, this is quite some time ago. I'm going to say at least 16 plus years ago, was guided to go up to Mount Shasta. I used to go up there quite often. And there's a retreat house that is a wonderful place to stay. It's kind of staying at your aunt's house kind of thing. And for whatever reason, I was guided. I'm like, okay, here we go. We're going. So I'm driving up there, and I'm getting information as I'm driving. I said, well, you're being called up here because you're going to be tested. I'm like, I'm not liking this. I'm thinking Highway 5, pull U-turn. But I made it all the way. And when I got there and I walked in and I said, hi, long drive from down in the Bay Area here. It's a good 4.5-hour drive. The lady who runs the house said, I'm so glad that you've come. There's somebody I need you to talk to. And I said, oh, great. So as we were talking, of course, the phone rang. On cue,
of course.
better than you can plan these things.
You'd be amazed how often that happens.
Yes, and so this lovely young woman who lived in town was being tormented, literally tormented, and she was one of those people that works with light, but she's not grounded.
Oh.
Okay. Lovely human being, very sweet and angelic and light, but she's not grounded. And so because she's not grounded, she's being attacked and all of these things are going on. And so I went to see her, and when I got there, I thought, well, it feels clear. Everything seems to be okay. So we cleared the place, and I cleared her, and but I kept having an uneasy feeling. And when I left, that feeling like you were talking about, that, uh-oh. Mm-hmm. So I'm driving away and I'm going, oh no. and I could literally feel it on my back. And I was like, oh, I don't think so. You're not coming home with me. So I drove all the way up the mountain, and as far up as I could drive, and then I went hiking up there, and I did a ritual for myself, and dumped it right there, and asked the mountain to take care of it for me, and it did, and I came back all nice and happy and cleansed, and said, next time I'm putting armor on before I go. And do a clearing. So
Yeah, there's always so much more to grounding than just grounding. It's actually an ongoing developmental process.
regularly and ongoing is
I'm
the good
always
word.
having to learn new ways to do it because one single method alone is not enough, ever. So just the random, if you're going to practice tip for the day. All right. Okay, so one of the more interesting cleansings I've done.
Yes.
It was actually a partial abandonment issue. So during one of the last big market busts,
Yes.
there was a gentleman who'd had to go into foreclosure on his home, but there were still people living there. And he was still technically living there, even though he was looking for another place to live, and he had a renter in the space. And it had started to get more and more unpleasant and feeling more and more populated. And so he did do a couple things. He had a friend come in and she did the Four Corners blessing and it calmed it down, but there was still so much activity. Well, when I came in, I'd realized when I looked around and did some reading, is a lot of people automatically assume that ghosts and hauntings are always of the dead. And I looked, and at the base of the property were these black-eyed little mole people. They were some sort of fae. And they, as far as they thought were concerned, this was basically a great mining zone. And they were just trying to push everybody else out because opportunity. And so, and it comes back again to every sort of cleansing you do always comes back to what's going on with the people that own the house. Well, fairies are big on threshold magic and very responsive to it. So I actually had him take a coin and I just gave him a quarter. It was in my pocket and said, okay, you need to go reclaim your house, at least for as long as you live there. So I had him go take a coin and bury it under a fence. And then I did some cleansing. And this one was one of the easier ones, is if you got past how they were freaky looking, but it wasn't like they were being threatening. They just kind of stopped and paused and listened to what I had to say. And then I reminded them, and I also, because the final straw for this client had been that they turned on the gas on the stove and left it, which is really dangerous and kind of crappy. And so I just took a coconut and put it on the stove, which to fairies and other spirits is a solid nuclear threat. And so I cleaned the space out. I did my own blessing on it, and it was much, much better. But it came down to that point where, because he'd mentally relinquished his ownership of it, that sent a signal to the spirit world to just move on in.
Yeah. Yeah. Things like that happen all the time, especially when something like that, where somebody is having their house taken away, or and they know that they're relinquishing it, right? But they're still staying there. And then the next people that move in, they've already got tenants before they even move in. So it's a good idea to get your when you move, is to have your home cleared, so that you don't have any ghosties and things that are hanging out,
Yeah, and sometimes
you never know where they're going to come in.
Yeah, you never really know what you're going to get.
Nope. And ghosts can scare people sometimes, you need to have a little help sometimes.
Well, it's good to go in and set boundaries.
Yeah.
Put that back. Very good.
I told you, not during the session. We'll talk to you later.
Like we said, boundaries.
Boundaries are very important. So I've got another one, which was, this one's a little more poltergeist kind of thing. There was a person, a young man that I knew, it was a little while ago, and he said, I understand you clear houses and I could use some help. And I said, sure. And he lived in an apartment complex, which is a little different than, because you can't walk around the property without walking around the property.
And you always have bleed from the walls from the people you share with, and the floor and the ceiling and the laundry room and the public spaces. And
yeah, it's a little bit different. And so as soon as I walked in, I felt something. And so I started creating a sacred circle in the very center of the home, and then I just expanded out. And as I was working on expanding the positive energy and clearing everything this way, and then I just kept working in a spiral and going that way. The kitchen drawers opened and things started coming out of the kitchen drawers. And I'm like, okay, we just keep going. And the cabinet doors opened up and things came out of the cabinets.
Wow.
And not flying, but just came out, like a cup came out, like a mug, came out and fell and broke. And the stuff that was in the drawers, they were rattling, that kind of thing.
And for reference, no, there was not an earthquake that day.
No,
We
there
do
was
live in
nothing like
California,
that.
But no.
No, and I had the person who was living in the place to stay in the center of the sacred circle. And I'm out there, with my mists and my herbs and everything going, I command you to leave, and I'm like, and then got more and more and more. And then finally it left. And I thought, okay, now we need to find out where is this coming from and why.
Yeah.
And he had taken, a lot of people enjoy going to the flea market and finding exotic things. And he had found an exotic mask, like kind of looking like an African type mask.
So for Buffy fans, you'll be laughing particularly hard at this story.
And there was something that was attached to the mask. I don't know what it was used for. I don't need to know. We put it back in the bag. I took it out. We buried it in sacred ground. It's done. It's finished. But then we still had something left, and we couldn't figure out what it was. And I finally found that it was his father that was, that's what was creating this tension that was in there. His dad, who had passed like a year before, when he saw this spirit that had come through, he was trying to protect his son. So he kept battling. And so there's all this, it's like having two men battling in the kitchen kind of thing.
And then the one left has PTSD and isn't really able to function and move on.
Exactly. So we had to have him talk to his father and say, everything's okay. I can handle this now. We've cleared the space.
We're cool. No more buying freaky masks from the flea market.
Oh, please don't. Oh, please don't. Or do, and then we've got more work. So
and I do feel like a good sidebar here is used things aren't necessarily bad. Now, admittedly, after a bed bug infestation I dealt with many years ago, I'm completely paranoid about adopting anything wood. But
oh my gosh,
it was. Yeah. Nothing
okay,
scares
we'll just leave that one.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. Just burn it and walk away. That's really the only good solution. But beyond that, like saging things out, or if you're going to get something used that you love, or used books, especially if you don't know the sources or all the hands they've passed through. And if you think about it, in any retail environment, everything in there is going to be touched by several different hands. So even
I sage it. I sage stuff all the time.
Honestly, anytime you bring something in, it's a good idea to limit how much you acquire anyway and be conscious about it. And not just because it's good for the earth, but it's because, like every piece of clothing you make, there's no such thing as truly machine-made clothing. Everything goes through somebody's hands, which means there's always all these different energies on it. And so it's just good to have a practice of welcoming it to your home and doing some kind of small cleansing with it. And, just making sure it's aligned with what's best aligned with your energy and purposes.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I didn't even think about clothing. Books and other, utensils and things like that. I used to love going to thrift stores, but I would always, before bringing it in, I'm standing out in front of my place with the sage, and I'm saging it, so all the neighbors can see me doing it.
Yeah, and well, as a shameless clothes horse, I mean, I've actually learned, like, I'll even put a little Epsom salt into my laundry. And this will just clean out the clothing really well. And for me, it just seems important to be more conscious of exactly how deeply interconnected we are. If you pick up any random object in your home, especially if it's mass made, just stop and think about all the hands it's passed through.
That's a really good thought. I have not done that, actually. Now I'm going to go home and I clear my place all the time, but I'm going to go home and look at my home completely differently.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting exercise, and a somewhat of a digression, but it's important to understand that sometimes it's not even necessarily a spirit portal opened up. It is simply the slow accumulation of things can create kind of an energetic muck, especially if those things still have certain personalities or spirits attached to them in some way, and maybe they'd be fine by themselves, but they meet each other and there's a conflict. So sometimes the haunting's not even about you, it's about your stuff, because the things attached to the stuff have issues.
Right. And I have had that when people have, someone in the family has passed, and you have grandma's hutch, or a dresser that belonged to a great grandmother or something like that. And it's a beautiful piece of furniture. And I've walked through, and you can feel it. And I go, oh, where'd you find this, and where did it come from? And boy, did she love this piece of furniture, kind of thing. And it's not that it's a bad thing, but it actually, feelings and emotions of other people do attach themselves.
Yeah, well, and especially if it's an item that's inherited that people were fighting over, and then it will start gaining that. For some reason, more so if it has a reflective surface. So that can be a whole other aspect too, there's a certain point where you start haunting yourself.
Oh, that's good to know.
So,
Okay.
okay. So I guess the next part that we want to talk about in this segment is talking about a more human kind of haunting, I guess would be the best way to put it, is psychic attack. And first of all, it is very rare, and I have experienced it in my 20s. And yes, it's scary, and a lot of it looks like a haunting at first. So the apartment I shared with my fiance at the time, normally my fiance, words, okay, but went from being a fairly bright, sunny place, young love, blah, 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 to it was just always had this air of constant depression.
Oh, my.
Like, it just took on this air, and it was like this fog that just filled the place. And if you looked on it with your inner eye, it looked like there was always smoke in there. And and it seemed so small and so random, I started having problems where this one piece of laundry detergent just wouldn't stay on its shelf. It just kept falling off. I put it in there. I actually barred it in there. It would still fall off the shelf. And I realized this was weird and something was wrong. And I did a house cleansing and it continued. And I did a house warding and it continued. And then I realized that there was someone else who practiced a lot of what I did, who prided herself in being very nasty. It was actually something she was proud of. And it occurred to me that, oh, yeah, it's crazy o'clock, and that probably means it's my turn. And so,
that's terrible.
It really is. And this crap never comes from people that are coming from a place of reason, ever. And it's usually really obvious who it is when you end up in that situation. And in this case, I'd interfered with her starting a cult, which I have no regrets about. And so I'd gone ahead and got a spellbreaker candle and started burning it. And I had to go through 2 or 3 of them because the first 2 I used actually started falling over sideways for no reason. And I was in Minnesota at the time. There is nothing no earth movement. No earth movement, had a plate. It kept tipping over for no reason. It would crack. At one point, it would fall over and start hissing. Now,
Ooh.
Candles can make some interesting noises.
Usually popping. I've never heard the hissing.
Yeah, hissing is not supposed to happen. It is actually not in law of physics land for candles. A lot of very strange things are, but hissing candles is not on that list. So the end result is that I finally told my friends what was going on, and it was so obvious to them, which, given that most of my friends were men, getting them to acknowledge something was going on for me is always kind of a pain in the butt. But they kind of looked around going, oh, wow, yeah, this is really messed up and it's definitely not you. So we ended up constructing a sort of shamanic thing where she chased something she thought was me, and then we'd take care of it.
Now, I have a question about that.
Mm-hmm.
When people are putting protection, witches are doing protection, would a witch bottle be of any help with that?
A witch bottle had been involved with that, and that was when I learned to start doing them as an annual thing and not just when there was an emergency. And it does slow a lot of things down.
It draws here she is, or the energy thinks.
Yeah, and it works to a point. I think that I have stuff going on where that alone is never going to be enough.
Oh, okay.
unfortunately. But for most people, that's plenty.
Okay, I was going to say,
Like, for most
well,
people,
knock on wood.
yeah,
mine's
honestly,
working okay.
look, if you've got the wherewithal to pee on a bottle, you deserve some protection.
It's not just that. That's not the only thing that goes in.
But that's
Shh,
usually the hard limit.
It's a secret. It's a secret what goes in.
Yes, anyway. Moving.
Leave it in.
Seal that thing up, maybe put a little wax on. Don't put it anywhere near a bulldozer and you're golden.
Yes. Yeah. It works for me. Okay. I was going to say that, that kind of leads into doing magic. And obviously, that's part of what we do. We're not just psychic readers. We do magic for ourselves and for other people. And I think that it's important for people to know that when you are doing magic for yourself, that to keep in mind that there is a ripple effect that happens and that kind of goes out, like if you throw a stone into the water, into a pond, a nice clear pond, and you watch all the ripples go out. And we don't think that, asking for something or wanting something, desiring for ourselves is necessarily going to have any negative effect on somebody else. Mm-hmm. But it has come to, in my awareness, that I just recently had one where somebody that I know had been doing some magic for themselves. It's none of my business. I was left it alone. But the ripple effect was just awful an experience. Not for me, but I noticed that there were several people that I know that were being affected by it. And I thought, well, this is really crappy. This is really bad. Yeah. They were getting sick and they were having all kinds of problems and being blocked and
wondering what the heck was going on.
And not seeing it and not seeing, because that kind of stuff is really hard to nail down.
Yeah.
And so I was asking, there's something going on. And when I asked, the answer was ripple effect. And I'm like, what? And it was like, well, the person who had been doing magic, unbeknownst, it wasn't an unconscious thing from them. That wasn't like a direct hit on somebody. They were working their own magic for their own benefit, but they didn't say necessarily for the highest and best for everybody concerned. Little, disclaimer kind of thing at the bottom.
Yeah, the writers, they matter.
They do matter. They really matter in the long run. And so, there was a lot of things that needed to be undone that got undone. And so things are a lot clearer. Mm-hmm. And always for the highest and best for everybody. Always. I always want the highest and best. There's plenty of goodness and life to enjoy for all of us.
The universe is expanding. There is freaking room.
Yeah.
There just
as
is.
we speak. I'm no, drifting away. Yeah, there's plenty of goodness, plenty of life, plenty of money, plenty of everything to go around. So just good to know.
And I know some of you watching this may be gritting your teeth because your life situations may not seem like that. And it's certainly my wish for you that the distribution will come your way.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe from watching this, you'll get a little extra pizzazz and things might clear for you. I hope so.
For your highest good and for those around you.
Yeah, always for the highest good.
And I know something else that I've started telling my clients to do when they start doing magic for themselves, especially since, again, I've done everything wrong you could possibly do wrong and still walk out alive.
It's a trial and error. Magic, trial and error, 101.
Well, and I very much have the mad scientist approach to begin with. So what does this do? Boom, that's what that does. Okay.
We memorize that, okay?
Yeah, well, I'm stupid enough to go, what does boom do?
Oh, God.
Anyway, so a writer that I've been telling my clients to do is add or better.
I'd like this or better.
This or better, because one, if you forget about other people, which is a human thing to do, this will open things up, and the results tend to follow the lines of poetry. And I think of poetry as, well, I actually think science and poetry are very integrated to me. So for me, magic is just the poetry of science. It doesn't make sense or follow all of the rules, but it follows enough of them for there to actually be some rules and procedures that you need to follow.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. One of the things that I've always said, not always, but most of the time, because I do forget as well. I'm just as bad as everybody else. Is to say better than I can picture for myself. So, because we get limited with our own personal thoughts on what we think that we would like. Well, I'd like a nice new car, but I don't think I can afford that. Well, maybe you can, and you just haven't found the right place to find your car. So better than I can picture for myself has always worked out with a nice surprise plot twist.
Yeah. So one thing that when we're talking about ghosts and hauntings, going back to our base, something
Yes.
that people ask me about is, where do the ghosts go when you get rid of them?
I have the, like in the Ghostbusters where you put the little jar and you put it in the wall. No, I'm joking. Go ahead.
So, and I think it depends, because it was a good question, because it's not something I put a lot of thought into. And I know I had one person who was concerned that I just make them the neighbor's problem.
Yes?
And sometimes that does happen. Sometimes they just kind of like, oh, okay, it was about that place. And so they're like, whatever. Sometimes I've put a couple that were particularly poorly behaved in crystals. So I love to stick them in Herkimer diamonds. They can just sit and spin until they learn how to behave themselves.
Very nice.
And I've actually gone as far as calling deities associated with death to come collect. Like, hey, I got some that were loose for you here.
Please take out the
Yours.
garbage. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Yeah.
Like,
I've had a few where it was mostly they don't even know they're dead. They're not really truly aware that they're dead. And once you talk with them and you tell them what's going on, I'm going to say 50% are like, oh, cool, and they leave. There's the other 50% that I'm not going anywhere and you can't make me. And it's like,
yeah. Okay, so something that's going to start happening in the next 100 years is you're going to lean forward and look them in their equivalent of an eye and say, your student loans, you're off the hook. And that will be all you need to do.
Very good. I like that.
For most of them.
May we all be debt free.
Relieved of this burden. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you.
All right, thank you. This was a fun show.
It was a lot of fun. I know, except for that ghost that, was coming. I told you later.
If you're going to do that, sort out the earrings.
Oh. She's tough.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching.
Go online to book an appointment with Christine, Diana, or other members of the Mystic Dream Psychic Guild at themysticdream.com. Mystic Dream Psychic Guild member Devin Hunter has his book out, The Modern Witch's Book of Power. Stop by the Mystic Dream today to pick up your copy or find it at your favorite metaphysical retailer.